Hey, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Let's Learn with Lizzie. Today we are going to study a very interesting and humorous poem titled How to Tell Wild Animals, written by Carolyn Wells. At first glance, this poem may look funny and light-hearted, but remember, every humorous poem also carries deeper meaning, and that is exactly what examiners expect you to understand. This poem appears very simple, but it is rich in irony, exaggeration, and poetic devices, making it extremely important for board examination. So listen carefully because we will go line by line, stanza by stanza, without missing any details. Before understanding the poem, we must know about the poet. Carolyn Wells was an American poet and writer. She was famous for writing humorous poems, light verse, and comic literature, especially for children and young readers. She believed that language itself can create humor, not just ideas. That is why you will notice strange spellings, funny situations, and funny, playful rhymes in this poem. From an exam perspective, remember Carolyn Wells is a humorous poet and her style is quite playful, ironic, and over exaggerated. Now let us understand the central idea of the poem. The poem claims to teach us how to identify wild animals, but does it really do that? No. Instead, the poet gives us dangerous, absurd, and impossible methods of identification, such as waiting until the animal attacks or eats you. This creates humor through irony. The poet is actually mocking all the guidebooks and instruction manuals that claim to teach everything logically. So, the central idea is to entertain, to use humor and exaggeration to show that wild animals are dangerous, to demonstrate the playful power of language. If asked for central idea in the examination, always mention humor, irony, and over exaggerations given in the poem. So, before entering into the poem, let me give you a very simple, easy, and important disclaimer that this poem is a mock guide, not real advice. So let us now talk about the themes focused in the poem. First comes the humor through exaggeration. The poet exaggerates situation to an extreme level, like getting eaten by the tiger or hugged to death by a bear or being attacked by any kind of wild animal. Then the poet moves on to the theme of man versus nature. Here, humans cannot dominate or control wild animals. We all believe that humans are the noble and supreme creature of God, and we try to tend and control to the nature. But at the end of the day, nature always wins. So, man versus nature plays a very important role in this poem. And now, moving on to the third theme, playfulness of language. Wrong spellings, funny rhymes, and light tone adds charm to this beautiful poem. And finally, coming to the most important theme, that is irony of identification. Irony used to identify the real characteristics of wild animals. It's quite ironical. Why? Because identification happens after it is too late, when you are almost dead, when you're being attacked by an animal. So just remember, this is not a serious nature poem. It is a comic poem with a warning hidden inside humor. Now let's focus on tone and the mood of the poem. The tone of the poem is light-hearted, comic, satirical, playful, and the mood created for the readers is amusing, entertaining, and slightly absurd. Even though the situations are dangerous, the poet never sounds serious or fearful. The poet maintains a light and comic tone despite describing dangerous wild animals, which is the beauty of the poem. And now, moving on to the structure of the poem. The poem has six short stanzas, regular rhythm is followed, conversational, simple style language is used, simple vocabularies are there, so you don't have to Google or search for the words and vocabularies in meaning in the dictionary. This makes the poem easy to understand, easy to remember, musical, and engaging. The structure supports the humorous nature of the poem, remember that. And now let us begin stanza-wise explanation. In the first stanza, the poet talks about the Asian lion. She says, if you go to jungles in the east and a large tawny beast approaches you, and if it roars while attacking you, then you can be sure it is an Asian lion. Now pause and think. Can you really identify an animal when it is attacking you? Of course not. You will go blank. That is where the humor lies, the irony of the situation. The poet uses irony because identification happens at the moment of your death. What is the purpose? What is the use of knowing the habitat of an animal when you are already dead? And now let's move on to the second stanza. The poet describes the Bengal tiger. She says, if a striped animal meets you and eats you, then it is a Bengal tiger. This tiger is ironically described as a noble wild beast. Can you imagine it? The humor comes from calling a dangerous animal a noble creature, suggesting that you wait until it eats you in order to know the characteristics and the identification of the animal. This is again an irony. This stanza again uses over exaggeration and irony. Mention in exams the black stripes on yellow ground for imagery based questions. So, what I'm trying to say is no matter what the question is asked, always use text evidences from the poem or prose in order to add standard to your answers. Now let's focus on the third stanza. The third stanza talks about the leopard. A leopard has spotted skin, jumps repeatedly on its prey, and here again the poet uses irony and says that once it leaps on you, you will know it is a leopard and screaming won't help there. Now notice something important. The poet writes LEP lep instead of leapt. Why? To maintain rhyme, create humor, show poetic freedom. This is called as poetic license, where the poet can bend grammar and spellings in order to maintain the rhyme and the rhythm of the poem. Just imagine what if we got the freedom to use poetic license in your examinations. Oh, just for fun, don't do this in your exam because we are not poets. Now let's move on to the fourth stanza. In the fourth stanza, the poet introduces the bear. She says, if an animal hugs you very tightly, then it is a bear. This is humorous because a bear's hug usually means strong hug, but here it actually means a deadly attack because the bear is not Winnie the Pooh who is going to hug you with love. It is a real life bear, a big, giant like monstrous bear which is going to hug you like it is going to literally squeeze your body till death. Irony is used again here. The poet adds, if you still have doubts, the bear will hug you again. So, irony plus exaggeration is used here again. This stanza plays with common expressions like bear hug, which means a tight hug. So, poet plays with this idea. She plays a lot with the language. A very funny girl. Now comes one of the most intelligent stanza in the poem, as the poet compares hyenas with crocodiles. Hyenas are believed to laugh or smile, whereas crocodiles are known for crocodile tears, that is, fake tears. So the poet says, if the animal smiles, it's a hyena. If it cries, it's a crocodile. This humor is actually based on popular belief and idiom. Sometimes I feel like the poet has used this stanza not to describe the animals but to describe the human characteristics. Like if you are smiling and having that vicious smile, you look like a hyena. And when you are trying to fool somebody using fake tears, then you are like a crocodile having crocodile tears. Oh, weird. But please remember, children, in the exam point of view, the poem is all about animals. Now let's move on to the final stanza of the poem, which focuses on chameleon. The final stanza talks about the chameleon, which changes color, blends with surroundings, is different to spot. So the poet says, if you see nothing on the tree, then it must be a chameleon. This is extremely humorous because absence becomes identification. So, how can you identify something or somebody without even seeing them? The poem ends on a clever and funny note, right? So, that's all about the poem. Now, let's focus on the poetic devices used in the poem. Very important for exams and very important to understand. So first one is rhyming scheme. It is very regular and creates musical effect like beast, east, you, lion, dian. Now let's focus on alliteration, which is repeated initial consonant sounds like roaming round. Then the poet has used irony throughout the whole poem. Literally in this video, I would have used the word irony for almost 100 times, right? Then we are moving on to hyperbole, which is like over exaggeration of something in order to make it more funny. Here, the noble wild beast is referring to the Bengal tiger, which is going to eat you. How can it be noble when it is going to eat you? And if there is nothing on the tree, this the chameleon you see. So if there's nothing to see, how can you see? Right? And next, you are having imagery, which is literally visual descriptions, stripes of tiger, spots of leopard, all these things which are helping you visualize everything in your mind and you can picture it inside your mind, then it is imagery. So remember, children, whenever you're answering questions related to poetic devices, make sure you are giving examples, that is, you're using text evidences from the poem. Just like that, don't say that the poet uses imagery. Say how the poet uses the imagery and give the text evidences that the phrase like stripes of tiger, spots of leopard create imagery and visual representation. Now let's focus on the language features. Carolyn Wells uses poetic license in the poem How to Tell Wild Animals to maintain its humorous rhythmic structure. Simple conversation language is used. You don't need a dictionary in order to understand the meaning of the word. Comic spellings like dine instead of dying, lep instead of leapt, all these adds rhythm and humor. Then moving on to humor used in the poem. Humor comes from unexpected conclusion, ironical situations, word plays, absurd advices. Poet mocks instructional guides. Now moving on to the message of the poem. Though the poem is very humorous, it also suggests that wild animals are pretty dangerous. Nature should be respected and feared also sometimes. Don't underestimate the animals, and language can entertain and educate everybody. So, this poem literally entertains while teaching cautions to you all. Now, let me give you some exam point of views that you need to remember. So, students, in this poem, remember the poet and the background of the poem, the central theme, humor and irony, poetic devices, stanza-wise explanation, language play, and the message given in the story. And the possible exam questions that can appear in your exams can be: how does poet identify Asian lion? Why is poem humorous? And explain crocodile tears reference. Discuss humor and irony in the poem. Explain poetic devices. What are the types of animals given in the poem and what are the types of identification that the poet uses in order to identify the animals? And to conclude, How to Tell Wild Animals is a brilliant humorous poem that is humorous, full of irony and exaggerated, a playful look at dangerous animals, an example of comic poem. It entertains while subtly warning the readers. And that's it for today. I hope you liked this video. If you liked it and if you felt like this video was helpful, kindly please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And see you soon in the next video.